Hello, welcome to Tastoria. My name's Kylie. I'm joined by Ben.
Hello, Kylie.
Hello, Ben. And Kate.
Hello.
And a fantastic wine, I believe, Kate.
It most certainly is. This is a sparkling wine made by a producer that is really not famous for sparkling wine at all. They're really primarily famous for a very serious red wine, which is often referred to as the Chateau Latour of the South. And it's something that you keep for a very long time before you drink. Really very muscular and structured and hugely complex. And this is the baby, well, actually it's not really a baby brother, it's the frivolous cousin, like, of that. Because when they're making the Cabernet Sauvignon for their very top wine, after about 3 days of fermentation, they bleed some of the juice out of the tank in order to increase the ratio of skins to juice and to just give the remaining juice extra oomph. And not being wasteful and ridiculous, they don't just throw that juice away. They turn it, well, for years they turned it into rosé, but then I believe the thinking behind this was, you know, we're mainly famous for really quite serious, expensive, but I think worth it wines. Why don't we do something that's just entirely frivolous, not supposed to be taken seriously, just something to be really enjoyed in the summertime, doesn't cost a fortune, but is very delicious.
Well, okay, I say we opened this and I can see that it's evaporating, so maybe we should have a little taster.
No problem.
This frivolous cousin of yours.
You can go first.
What's the name of this frivolous cousin?
Well, Kate would know, but it looks to me like sparkling rosé. But in France, I'm not entirely sure there is an appellation contrôlée for sparkling Cabernet Sauvignon.
I doubt it
from
very
the
much.
Carrols, yeah? So,
I doubt it very much. Actually, that's a very good question. Well, this is, yeah, it's a Van Rousseau. They make no mention at all of appellation contrôlée, so it's probably sort of Van de Table status.
So it's a non-vintage.
It is.
Right.
Even though
legally,
it comes from one vintage.
Okay, so it comes from one vintage. So we could probably tell what vintage it comes from. Little tip, by the way, if you're buying wines that are really from a really great estate and they're just completely delimited legally to a Van de Table or Vino da Tavola or whatever, that you can sometimes tell the vintage by looking at the lot code, which on this bottle of wine is up here. And I'd like to just tell you that it doesn't give me any indication what the vintage is, but I reckon it's about, well, it must be probably at least within 2 years, don't you think?
That would be last year.
Okay.
I mean, this sells out. They make this in very small quantities, so it tends to sort of sell out. We generally don't have this anymore by the end of October.
Right.
And we have to wait for the next summer. So it's very hot off the press sort of wine, and you're meant to drink it really young, really fresh.
But I mean, it's pinker than a schoolgirl's blushes. So why? They must have taken off the juice. So you say after 4 days. So there's
It's
juice
2 to 3 days.
Okay, fine. And alcohol-wise,
11%.
I mean that's good drinking.
Yeah, that's nice and gentle,
Cool.
isn't it?
Yeah.
So
So it's fizzing away in our glass.
Yeah. Go on.
I've got a really good idea. We should try it.
Why not?
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah. Or santé.
Cheers, Santé.
Perhaps we should describe the smell. Kate, could you?
Well, for me, that's very berry-ish, but not in a confected way, which is why I really like it. You know, sometimes very berry-smelling rosés are a bit ribena-ish. Do you know what I mean?
It's a little bit more of a spicy berry, isn't
Exactly.
it?
Exactly.
And actually, Van Rousseau, I'm guessing this isn't as sparkling, as full as carbon dioxide as, say, champagne is. Very
Exactly.
supple on the palate.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, it is. I mean, it's not a bottle ferment like champagne. It's tank. And yeah, they're just going for a really sort of fine, gentle mousse. It's not aggressively sparkling, which actually makes it easier to drink, I think.
Yeah,
Just for me.
totally. I think it's delicious.
What can we tell by the colour? Like having a look, like you say, it's a lovely warm rosé colour. It's a Cabernet grape, though.
It is.
Cab
And
Sauv.
if you were being, you know, a really serious sort of student in wine in an exam, or you were working towards an exam, as Ben is actually, you have to learn. Yeah,
what would you say?
Very, very tough exam. You'd have to learn what sort of shades you get from every grape variety. Cabernet is famous because there's a lot of pigment in Cabernet skins. They're very thick, so you generally get very deep colour from a Cabernet. And for a rosé, it's a relatively good colour. I mean, they do come darker, but you also get a lot which are far paler.
And the region that this comes from in France, this is a very famous winemaking region, isn't it?
Well, it is now, largely thanks to Master Daumas Gassac. You know, they've made wine. Southern France generally was actually the first place in France that they ever made wine, around Marseille, and it was probably Greek, the Greeks who brought it over.
So going back,
so we're
way
going back
now.
to, you know, BC. And then when it became more established for a long time, it was the place they went to in France for everyday plonk, quite frankly. Particularly when they built the Canal du Midi. So before that, they didn't really have any way of getting the wines further north. So they made wines, but they just stayed in the local areas. It then became a region where they were responsible for the rough stuff. And it wasn't
Armies
really,
wine.
yeah, exactly. It was really people like the Guibert family in the 70s who proved that you could make extraordinarily good wines down there. And the floodgates opened. I mean, since then, you've now had a lot of the regions down there who've been granted their own appellation status. You know, places like Corbière and Minervois. Those were a lot more recently granted status than places like Burgundy, for example. So there has been quite a revolution in how people perceive the region. You can make brilliant wine down there now.